Has this ever happened to you?
I went to Sunday school every Sunday, and now I can't hear a loud horn without having an anxiety attack.
Hi, I'm recently deceased but never forgotten Christian music sex symbol Carmen. I'm calling collect from the big house, meaning heaven, not jail, to tell yous how to get answers for your religious traumas.
I started the excommunication station, and now I realize why empathy felt weird when I was a kid, and how the Council for National Policy, a shadowy Christian organization, controls just about fucking everything in America.
So if you've been looking for answers, or if you have ever been on the outside wondering, hey, what's really going on in the church, these gabagools have the info you need. So look up the excommunication station wherever you get your podcasts, and all their socials under XCOMPod. Peace be with yous.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's mini-series. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and for this installment I sat down to talk with John Verner, journalism student at NYU, host of the Cult of Christianity podcast, and former evangelical Christian. As chances would have it, I was recently interviewed by John for an upcoming piece about the evangelical movement and cult survivors. That article was published this week, and I wanted to open this mini-series by reading you a segment taken from John Verner's Substack, which I will link to in the episode description. Part of the article reads, "Are ex-evangelicals cult survivors? Better yet, am I a cult survivor? When I reflect on the thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours that I spent studying to become a pastor, I never imagined that I would one day leave evangelical Christianity. As a child, every Sunday I sat in a pew with my family, singing hymns and listening to sermons that instilled in me deep fear and skepticism about the outside world. I was taught that non-believers were going to hell, and that the only way to avoid eternal damnation was to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Saviour. There was a sense of isolation that came with my indoctrination that made it hard for me to connect with others. I couldn't form meaningful relationships with people who didn't share my background. I felt like an eternal outsider. No one could understand the fear and bewilderment I felt. Even now, years later, the scars from functioning as an alien on my home planet remain. I am not alone in my experience, as there has been a mass exodus from evangelicalism since 2017, according to the Public Religion Research Institute. Evangelicalism is a multifaceted movement within Protestant Christianity that emphasizes the importance of personal faith in Jesus Christ, the authority of the Bible, and the need for evangelism and missions to spread the gospel. The term gets misused as conservative Christian or fundamentalist often. It is broader than those ideas, yet socially, the loudest evangelicals are often the most problematic variety. Whether this evangelical evacuation is caused by divisions over Trump support, loss of trust in the institutional church, or simply an evolution of humankind is up for debate. The coronavirus pandemic only amplified this trend of socially distancing from the church. These religious refugees are sometimes nicknamed ex-evangelicals. Online, the hashtag, slang, and branding have simulated a safe space of recovery for many. But that word hits my ears like a hammer. I dislike being defined by my former faith, which is implicit in the word. Instead, I choose to call myself a cult survivor. Before we get started, a massive, huge welcome to the 3 newest patrons of the show, Sandy, Betty, and Hick. I am astonished to have gained 8 new patrons this month, with some of you still being here from the very start of the show. It is a truly wonderful feeling to have your support, and it's so greatly appreciated that I'm able to continue this work. Thank you all so much. For early access to ad-free and full-length episodes, you can visit patreon.com/thecultvault to support me from as little as £1 a month. Also, before we get started, I wanted to mention that I may start having other people's podcast episodes pop up in my feed. I am part of an exchange program of sorts with my podcast hosting service, where we swap episodes onto each other's feeds to help boost awareness of each of our shows. I will only be placing podcasts that I have personally vetted onto my feed, and some may be a slightly different genre, but hopefully a welcome break from some of the more difficult subject matter. So I apologise in advance if this causes any confusion when you come here to listen to the Cult Vault podcast. Lastly, thank you, Hidden Object Fanatic, for leaving a review this week. I will be sure to continue working on my editing. I know it isn't the best, and I know that sometimes the quality of the Zoom calls can be difficult to listen to. But as we go forward, I do hope that you start to notice some improvements. And thank you to Oputop for the kind words you left this week regarding the show. I'm so thankful for your feedback, and I'm really glad that the content is helpful. But for now, finally, here is John Verner. So hello, John, and welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation today about your life and your experiences and how you started your podcast, The Cult of Christianity. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Well, thanks for having me on, Casey. Yeah, I am John. If you Google me, John Verner, you'll find out that I think Christianity is a cult. I'm a little bit qualified to say this. I grew up in it, and so grew up in it, was very zealous. I went to Bible college to become a pastor, and I have my Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Exposition with a interdisciplinary minor in literature, both ancient and English. And so I was full on board, did everything right a Christian could do. I was a cool Christian. I was a smart Christian. I did everything right. I got married. I was a youth pastor. I was taking a little break from like pursuing pastoral jobs because I was a little tired after Bible college. It wears you out a bit. And so after that, I was just kind of leaning into my faith a little bit. But then my life went a very different direction. I had always had questions that I was ignoring, suppressing, trying to do the right thing. But it all kind of came to a head when I came home and realized I was going to be divorced very soon because there were divorce papers on the counter. We had never talked about it. It was a total shock. The apartment was half empty. And from that point on, my world unraveled. And so the plot points, just to kind of do a drive-by, is I ended up drinking what I had left financially. I ended up homeless. I ended up couch surfing. And then ended up living in a van, and then did the van life thing. It was not the glamorous Instagram version. It was a very rough version of van life where I traveled all over the US, and like would play my guitar on the side of the street for money, and then also like beg people. Ate nothing but a can of beans a day. It was pretty brutal. And while I was doing that, I started writing my book, The Cult of Christianity: How Churches Control, Contain, and Convert. And book isn't that great. I don't recommend anyone buy it. But what it did do is it got me kind of in this space of understanding both cults and Christianity, both from my personal experience and reading more and such. And so in 2021, I wanted to promote the book. And so I did a podcast, figured 6 people would listen and it would be a fun little side project. And then all of a sudden it did way better than the book did. And I actually realized I enjoyed interviewing people. I enjoyed interviewing both cult survivors, ex-Christians, religious experts. And I really actually enjoy still interviewing Christians and disagreeing with them and figuring out where we disagree and getting into all that. So that's a little bit about me. I'm happy to go in depth more on any of those plot points, but that's how I got here.
Just a little bit about you, nothing too major.
Yeah.
What a summary that you've just given us. I mean, you mentioned that you were a zealous Christian when you were growing up. Is this part and parcel of your family, or were you independently interested in your spiritual journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I was younger, so my old testimony was that I wanted to obey the rules when I was really young. That was important to me. I grew up in a pretty average, I wouldn't say particularly unhealthy household compared to some who grew up Christian. I did have a loving father. I had a loving mother. The early years were more about just following the rules. So I used to say I didn't actually become a Christian until I was about 11, when I finally decided for myself. So from that point on, it was kind of my faith. It wasn't something I was just doing to please other people, and I made a very distinct decision. Part of it had to do with some Bible camp experiences that a lot of people have. Part of it had to do with just hormones rushing and like try intensifying and figuring out your own identity. The real zeal came about age 17 when I felt the call to be a pastor. To this day, I still can't explain to you what that is or what it means, or if I was just tripping myself out, what that was. But apparently, Jesus was telling me to go be a pastor, and I said, yes, sir. And so that's why I did that. So it definitely has some like family ties, but I would say for the most part it was my faith. I owned it.
In terms of your education as a child, did you grow up in traditional public school or were you homeschooled?
Yeah, I was homeschooled all the years of my life. I was a very particular kind of homeschooled. Some people refer to it as unschooling, which is basically I chose my own courses. So my education was kind of like the way I describe it is I was like, it would have been amazing if it had right information. Because the methodology of learning made me a very good learner because I was, all school was homework, all school was self-motivated. But I was learning about how the pilgrims were great, and I was learning about how the earth is was created in 6 days by God, and how it wasn't ever this bad, but implications like yeah, humans rode dinosaurs or whatever, just kind of the silliness that you get in particularly conservative Christian circles.
Was your educational material, although you could choose what you wanted to learn, was it provided by a specific service?
Yeah, it was provided. I believe it was called Christian Liberty Academy. I don't know if it's an actual academy or if it's only for homeschooling. But yeah, they would send in like the test and like the stuff, and then you send it back. So it's not like my parents were ever grading anything. It's the system is supposed to encourage like actual education. Which so I mean, so there's horror stories from other, especially people in the US, who when they were homeschooled were subject to like really bad education through and through. And I would say my education was bad in the sense that there was too much indoctrination in the actual material, but the methodology was fine.
It's unfortunate that, isn't it? Because I feel like, especially in the UK, education needs a big reform. It's
Mhm.
very exam based and very exam heavy. And I was speaking to John Atack the other day, who said that Finland is the leading country on test results because they do one exam at the end of the year for each subject.
Hmm.
So instead of having all of these exams that kids are supposed to do,
Mm.
it's one exam at the end, and then the kids do so well that it puts Finland at the top of the board. And I don't know, countries and politicians are very particular about those things. So it's unfortunate that people aren't taking more credence from student-led and pupil-led curriculums.
Yeah, well, it's in my I'm not an expert in this field by any means, but I do, everyone in my family is a teacher. My sisters, my mother, her mother before that, like all worked in schools and such. And I'm pretty convinced from talking with them and everything I've read that education needs to be catered to the individual child. And what homeschooling, when it's done right, can do is actually provide a really cool way of doing that, and having them take ownership of their education. What's bad is when you're homeschooled, especially if you, I don't know, have an abusive family or a family that, brain does the work of the cult, brainwashing their children. You're not exposed to mandatory reporters. You're not exposed to people in school who can give you new ideas. When it becomes very insular, that's what's really dangerous about it.
So now I'm really interested in your sister and your mum being teachers and you being homeschooled. Is there a story behind that?
I wouldn't, nothing too in depth, I wouldn't say. Just it was more just like a personal decision. Just the public school systems, at least where around where I lived, were not held in high regard. And private education was probably too expensive. I mean, it probably was just kind of a simple math game.
So your book, The Cult of Christianity, I love alliterations, and I feel like your book title is, can you just say it one more time?
The Cult of Christianity: How Churches Control, Contain, and Convert. I joke with people, you know, you can take the kid out of preaching, but you can't take the preaching out of the kid. It really is just like something I learned when I learned to be a pastor, and I'm good at it, and so I guess I stick with it.
People will say, have you read John Verner's book? No, what's it called? Well, the shortened version is
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's great. I absolutely love it. And you gave us a bird's eye view of your journey through Christianity. And at 17, you had this experience that you can't explain, which I think is, well, from interviewing other people, you might be able to answer this better than I can. But I think that that is not something that's too uncommon. It is something that is experienced amongst members of religious groups, and often can be a catalyst in keeping somebody from perhaps thinking about leaving a religion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's maybe the point to really hone in on, because a lot of people, I'd say this all the time, a lot of Christians actually agree with me when I point out the problems in Christianity. They don't want to admit it sometimes, and they kind of, you know, are slow to be precise in their disagreement or agreement. But what is very true is that the thing that keeps people in these groups is, well, how do I explain what I felt? They can't answer that question. How do I explain? Because when I was like a youth pastor, I used to tell the kids, Jesus should be as real to you as any of your other five senses, if not more real. That is the type of thing you hear, and the type of thing that gets parroted, and the type of culture that's created in all sorts of cults, but definitely in Christianity. So when you've convinced yourself that Jesus is that real, or your spiritual experience is that real, how do you then go back? How do you then say, I guess that was my head? I guess that played tricks on me. There's two reasons that are top of mind for a reason someone wouldn't want to, you know, change their mind about that experience. One is it's embarrassing. It makes you feel duped. It makes you feel like you're too stupid to think that someone pulled, you know, the wool over your eyes. So like that's one reason. And another reason is maybe that experience was the closest thing to love they felt at the time. And that's like a breakup. That's hard. That's hard to say goodbye to that. So it's very natural and interesting. I don't, you know, I'm not a materialist, I'm not a rationalist. I leave room for spiritual possibilities. But what I just said actually recently in another podcast I was on is those experiences with me are negotiable. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to pretend I know what happened. If someone can tell me what happened, I'm all ears. You know, I know what I thought at the time. I know what I felt at the time. I know I don't think that's what it was now, but I can't tell you what it was. And I think that kind of open-mindedness is amazing and great. And all humans should have that open-mindedness. And I think it's the exact thing that cults don't want you to have. Cults want you to know exactly what it was, and it's what they're telling you it is.
I think that's quite a profound thing that you've explained there, because often in journeys of deconstruction or recovery, I think that I've had conversations where people have said, so it wasn't a religious experience because I'm no longer religious, so it must have been this. Kind of replacing one reasoning for another. And actually, what you've said there is, maybe it was a spiritual experience, you know, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. And I think that that says a lot about your introspection and how you've progressed on your own journey. Do you think that that's through your own work that you've done independently, or through the work that you've done on your podcast, speaking with other people and gaining their perspectives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think a lot of it is just who I am. I think I'm an imaginative person. I think it would be a really boring life if the only things that are what we see. I think it's a beautiful thing to engage your imagination in other things. But I believe that has to be so introspective. That has to be so person to person. And the second you say that reality is a bigger reality, a more real reality, you start running into trouble. I think for me the progression of that um was something like I'll put it this way in the Christian context. You can see Christians do things good for other people, like real sacrificial type giving, real sacrificial type love, a version of love, anyways. When they're expressing that, their connection to what they believe is the divine, their connection to God, does add something. I don't know what it adds, and it adds a lot of bad things in practice. But personally, it makes them feel things that are not a typical person's experience or a typical a mundane experience for a person. So I think it's just always been part of my worldview, and I've never deconstructed that because it's not harming anyone, it's not harming me, and it's not harming anybody else, and so I don't need to get rid of it. If it was pointed out or I realized that it was harming me or someone else, then I'd freaking get rid of it. But for right now, I think it's a beautiful lens to see life through.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds. I think we all need to adopt a little bit of John Verner into our lives. That sounds.
Oh gosh, don't say that. That's what cult leaders say.
Oh yeah, but I mean, the cult of John Verner. Does
Yeah,
that have a ring to it? No, maybe not.
I hope not.
So at 17, you make this decision to pursue a pastoral role. What are the next steps? Is it immediately finding a Bible college to enroll into? And how long does all of that take?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, especially in the US. I think it's something like 40,000 denominations of Christianity, and they all have their own little ways of doing things. So the denomination, the specific brand of Christianity I grew up in, was a little bit more on the heady side of things, a little bit stuffy, a little bit traditional, and kind of bookish. And so no one preaches in that denomination without a master's degree, specifically an MDiv, a master's of divinity. I did not want to wait. I was like, God said now, I'm doing it now. So I was searching for affordable options for a undergrad degree for preaching, and the most reputable one that came up was Moody Bible Institute. This was in 2012. They were a little bit more reputable then than they are now, and it actually was a fairly good education. So I apply the degree is Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Exposition, just teaching the Bible basically. So with that degree, you could either teach the Bible in like a private Christian school or become a pastor, youth pastors, things like that. Most people who took that degree probably did go on to get their MDiv as well. But yeah, I kind of wanted to just get into it, just do it right away. It was the only school I applied to, and I got in, and it was good. I quickly became friends with professors more so than my fellow peers. It was the most Christians I had ever been around. My life was kind of wonky that way, that most of my social circle were not Christians growing up, at least in high school years. And so, I enjoyed that kind of like rawness and realness as like a break from my Christian life. And then when I went to Bible college, there was none of it. There was no rawness, there was no realness. And so I kind of didn't fit in very well socially, but I excelled academically. Like I really enjoyed the classes, and I enjoyed learning how to speak. When I'm feeling especially sarcastic, I'll say I have a degree in TED Talks, because it's basically the same formula. And so I learned how to, public speak very well, and that's fun. So yeah, that was kind of the next steps for me at least. And then I did some internships, some youth pastoring, that kind of thing.
You said that Bible college afterwards you had a bit of a break from pursuing a pastoral role because it wore you out. Is it
Yeah.
because there was no rawness and realness, and it was quite exhausting to go to class after class after class, and it all relate back to the same subject matter?
Yeah, definitely. That was a huge part of it. Another thing, just larger context, I graduated in 2016. And so that was quite a year for evangelicals. I was never a fan of Trump. It kind of was a little earth shattering to realize that not only were some evangelicals for Trump, or like what I was kind of expecting during that election season, because 2015 is when we're starting to talk about all this stuff, so I hadn't graduated yet. Um, I was expecting people to maybe say I prefer Trump to Hillary. I was like, not that was never going to shock me. What did shock me was being a fan of him and loving him. That was confusing. I was like, this guy, one, definitely not a Christian, definitely BSing it. Like, there's no chance this man spends any time in the word or in church or anything like that. But like, he got worse and grosser and like bad, like really bad, especially during election season. I mean, it was always terrible
Biblically
and
bad as well, like
yeah, but
biblically
like
bad,
by their own
posing for
standards. Yeah,
photos with the Bible upside down and all sorts of things,
yeah,
and people are
all
like, oh,
sorts of
look at this
wild
Christian
things.
man.
Yeah, I mean, it's just clearly a grifter, right? He was just clearly like appealing to a base. But I was dumbfounded that evangelicals were falling for it. So I got into like a lot of like it's amazing to me how liberal I was perceived at Bible college when I look back on those days and perceive myself so conservative compared to now. Um, and so yeah. And so that was kind of also happening at the same time, was this great big social event that is very much steeped in evangelical culture. That was also happening and also jading me. And also being like, really? Like, this is who we are going to be known as? Like, aren't we, like, doesn't the Bible say we're supposed to be known for our love? And this is what we're going to be known for? That was also really hard to, like, operate, like, in any serious way as a Christian during that time.
You graduating in 2016, you're married somewhere around this time. Does it happen
Mhm.
before or after your graduation?
So yeah, I started dating my ex like freshman year, and we divorced, or sorry, we got married in oh God, it's been a minute now. In July of 2016.
Okay. Oh, so a big year for you then. Lots of
Too much going
various
on that year.
yeah. Lots of different things. And this is somebody that you met at Bible college?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
So you met each other, got married, you thought everything was okay, but there was other stuff that
Yeah,
you didn't realize that.
I was in a lot of denial in those days. I don't talk too much about it publicly, just for out of respect for my ex. But what I will say is the I was a bad husband through and through. I was jaded. I was very apathetic. I was bored. I was definitely gaslighting. I was on a kind of like bordering on sociopathic and just my ethos. Like I was just not caring about anyone or anything and doing my own thing. So I would even say I was emotionally abusive. And that's sad. I hate that. I've done a lot of therapy to try to process through that. But what was making it worse the whole time was, while I kind of knew I was failing, I was more worried about failing God than failing the person I actually loved. Um, and that's what's really sad about the cult, right? Is you can't even focus on the things you need to focus on because you're so worried about pleasing the guy in the sky. But what it really turns out to be is pleasing your pastors and your immediate cult leaders that are around you. And so it makes me very sad because I think it's for the best that we split ways. But I wish we could have split ways in a very different way, in a much healthier, caring, empathetic way.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, John. You said before
Mhm.
we hit the record button that anything you say on air is fair game and you own everything that you say. And I think that, again, your willingness to speak about yourself being responsible for potentially harming others, again speaks to your healing and your own introspection as well. So I do appreciate you offering that to us. And then finding the divorce papers, do you feel like that was the moment where you began to question your faith because it was so kind of out of left field, or was there a kind of slow build up, or a significant moment that wasn't this one where you thought, I don't know what I'm doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I like to say trauma compounds and turns into one big thing, and it's hard to kind of peel back the layers and figure out what happened when. What I'll say, I'll go back in time a little bit to 16-year-old John. This is in the opening chapter of my book. I talk about I'd written a letter to my church leaders, basically calling them out for some bad behavior, where they were, I had broken it into categories. It was something to the effect of they were very disrespectful to teenagers. They just were rude to us. They had really unbiblical, is what I would have said at the time, but really bad views of music. And they were kind of one of those churches that was like, if it wasn't written in the 1600s, it's evil. Which
There's nothing
I'm like,
bad
oh.
happened then.
Well, it's so funny because all those hymns that they love so much are literally drinking songs that like were taken from bars and put in the church. So it's just like, what? But then I was also taught they were super Protestant, so they were really against Catholics, and they would just commit hate speech against Catholics. I mean, probably the most brutal anti-papal speech you could ever hear. And that really bothered me because I was like, wait, they're Christians. What are we doing? And then yeah, basically my argument was I would never invite someone here to church because this place is terrible. And like, what are we doing? Aren't we supposed to go save people? So why is it so bad? And so what came out of that letter was me being confronting them confronting me. Who's to say? It was I was invited to the church. They had this boardroom, and in the book I say it looks like The Apprentice, like at the Donald Trump's old show. Like it's like that kind of boardroom. And my dad and mom were there, but I asked them if I could face them alone because that's part of the owning my own faith thing. And then they ripped into me for 4 hours, told me all the ways I was sinful. To this day, I still have long hair. It's up in a bun right now. But one of the reasons I have long hair to this day is because they told me my long hair was sinful. Because I was trying to look like the world. And they told me the way I dressed was inappropriate, the way my friends dressed was inappropriate. They said I hugged girls at church too long because this is a direct quote. If you hug a girl for more than 3 seconds, you'll get a boner. And I'm like, that sounds like a personal problem. But yeah, it was just pretty brutal, and they got me to tears. I mean, I was crying. It was actually a really important moment for me and my dad because my dad storms in and he goes, "Who was yelling at my son?" And it became a moment. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought this was your parents saying this to you. This
No,
is
this was
right. So
the church leaders.
You're waiting to speak to your parents separately, and this is the
Yeah,
church leaders.
they were waiting outside the room. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I misunderstood you there, and I was going to ask, like, well, were your parents pressured into saying these things themselves?
Yeah.
Because it's just sounded like so.
No, my parents would never say anything like this. They are not perfect people. And I have radical worldview differences from them. But the thing they would never do is lay into someone for 3 hours. And the fact that these grown men thought it was okay to do this to a 16-year-old still kind of baffles me.
So your dad
But
bursts in the room and tells them that they need to stop.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, me and his relationship. I mean, me and my dad are best friends in a lot of ways still to this day. He doesn't listen to any podcasts or read the book, and I don't blame him. And I don't really want him to. But he knows about it. You know, it's no secret. And yeah, so that was a good moment for us. But what it did was that whole scenario, because at the end they were like, "We'll give you the last word," and the last words I say are, "I don't recant anything I said," which is a paraphrase quote from Martin Luther, when what he said to the Catholics, and they worshipped Martin Luther at this church. So it was a little bit of my first witty tongue-in-cheek moment with church leaders too. But ever since then, I realized I don't need to just trust whatever a pastor says. I don't need to just trust whatever a cult leader says. And so that's what started that. So ever since then, I had tons of like religious trauma stories ever since then, but that was the first one. And so when we get to the point where I'm at divorce papers, that point I'm not leaving my faith. If anything, I'm clinging to it harder because that's what I know, right? A lot of people do this when they're going through trauma, they cling harder to their faith. But what's interesting is I was the church me and my ex were going to was not only treated me badly but treated her badly. She had not experienced the same levels. She had experienced some bad stuff with church, but not the same levels I had. And I was warning her. I was like, this could get ugly really quick because they'll want to be involved. They're going to want to do it their way. They're going to want us to stay married no matter what. Like, these are the kind of things that are going to happen. And yeah, the one of the big moments, there were two big moments. One was more personal, one was more internal, one was more external. The external one was I had just gone out to breakfast with a mutual friend of me and my ex's, and I was basically telling her, hey, if this goes south, take her side. I won't hold any resentment to you. Like that's the way our dynamics worked out. I will not be offended if that's how that happens. In the car, I get a call from my pastor who we had scheduled a meeting to kind of give him an update on, because we had started seeing a relationship coach right after all this. We were trying to figure out if there was a way for us to stay together. And so he gets a call. He says, hey, we got a meeting tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do we really need to meet? And I go, what? He's like, I mean, like, are y'all just gonna say you're leaving the church? I was like, no. Like, we were just gonna come in and update. He's like, well, you're not doing it seems like y'all don't really care what I have to say, so why are we even doing this meeting? And I was like, excuse me? He was like, well, we've told you things to do, and then like we hadn't shown up to church in like 2 weeks because we were burned and tired and whatever. And I was like, I won't say his name, but I said his first name, and he was just not having it. And I was like, so you're gonna be the reason I don't go to church ever again. That's what. And he was like, well, I was like, seriously, why should I? This is the same shit, different day. And I'm sick of it. So that was kind of the more external moment where I was like, enough. I've had enough. But that was more about church. What really changed internally was a conversation I was having. I won't say with who. And they were asking the age-old problem of evil question. How can a good God let bad things happen? And they were saying it specifically in the context of what was happening in my life at the time. And I started literally start talking about Adam and Eve and how the fall and this, and it's actually merciful for God to save any of us. And before I even finish the spiel, I stop mid-sentence and I just look at them and I go, I've been brainwashed. I'm like, I don't believe
Wow.
any of that. I'm like, it's just the script. It's the script I've been given. It's the script I've been given for that question. I'm just following it. And that was kind of the bigger moment of, I think I'm done. I think I'm done with this.
That is wild. Just in the moment, the thought just occurred to you.
Yeah, because what I did I really think that I deserved the feelings I was having, or the person across from me was having it was just such a like earth-shattering, like, this is a cult. And I had called other types of Christians cultists before. The more extreme I thought they were, it was kind of my pejorative. But that was a
I
moment
feel
where I was
like
like,
that's
oh, it's
quite
all of them.
a religious thing to do, though, isn't it? Like any group that's not
Yeah.
your group is a cult in one of the definitions sense as well. Not, I think it's like if it's not a traditional type of Christianity, it's a cult. I can't remember which
Yeah.
dictionary defines it that way, but there is a definition that and that's what the show, I think the premise for the show Cultish is based on, any type of
Yeah.
Christianity that is not that the two or three hosts align with, then
Mhm.
it's cult like, which is just a whole other kettle of fish for another day.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that's a wild moment. You're sitting in this meeting and you're realizing in that moment that what you're saying is not what you believe, and it's just what you've been taught to say in response to that specific set of events.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
if it's good to rip the Band-Aid off and just kind of have that moment, or if it's better to have it gradually so you can kind of realize what's happening.
I would say it was
where do you go
gradual.
from there? It was
I
gradual,
w-
okay.
because it started younger, but it was just it was a what 6 7 year slow burn of ripping the band-aid off. Um, yeah, I mean, and it's funny because the further I get removed from those moments, the less emotionally charged they are in my brain. But yes, at the time it was torture. Sure. I mean, am I really about to go up against the God of the universe and spit in his face? Am I really about to like leave all the networking I've done, not just for like the 4 years I was at Bible college, my entire life? All the connections are based in this system. Am I really gonna just like say fuck it and go for it? Who's gonna hate me? Who's gonna love me still? And who's gonna do what was really the most common response at first? Pretend to love me to try to get me back. And that was scary. And that's when, gin and vodka helped me kind of stumble through it a little bit. I don't advocate for alcoholism, but what I tell people a lot of the time about that phase of life is um I was bleeding. I was bleeding and I had to throw something on, so I reached for duct tape. And is don't put duct tape on a wound, but sometimes that's all you got. And that's all I had for a while. And then years later I had to rip the duct tape off, and that was ugly and not fun. But I'm glad I had the duct tape when I did.
That is the end of part 1 of this mini-series on the cult of Christianity. For links to John's books, writing and podcast, you can follow the links in the episode description. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.